What is the most fucked up thing that happened in a children's TV show? Too many episodes of Hey Arnold. Like finding out Stoop Kid stayed on his stoop because he was abandoned there and was homeless but hopelessly waiting for someone to come back for him. How Monkey Man was mentally ill and also homeless. That one where you learn Grandpa and his sister had a lifelong rift because the only good thing in their life as children, their puppy, got killed by a car in front of them and they each blamed the other. How Leela and her dad ask squatters to keep from being homeless. How the kids on the show routinely get mugged. Or how Mr. Hyun hates Christmas because that's the anniversary of the day he handed his baby daughter off to an American soldier to get her out of the war zone because he wasn't sure they'd survive, then spent the rest of his life working to immigrate to America to try and find her, only having the name of the city to work from, and ended up missing her whole childhood because he was too poor to hire a private investigator. Until Helga literally sold the shoes off her feet to hire one to make Arnold happy. Oh, and how Helga is obsessed with Arnold because she grew up neglected by an alcoholic mother and aggressive narcissistic father who only cared about her older sister, and Arnold was literally the first person in her entire life to show her any kindness when, as a preschooler, he offered to share his umbrella because her parents forgot to take her to her first day of preschool and she had to walk in the rain, by herself, with no coat, as a 4-year-old in what we can only assume is New York City. So yeah, that show was supremely jacked up. Henry the Tank Engine was bricked up inside an abandoned tunnel for having anxiety while Ringo Starr mocked him. There was a story from Chicago's golden age of children's television, at WGN in the 1950s. A chimpanzee was the sidekick to a host, and would do interstitials to Three Stooges shorts. One time they had a guest who had a parakeet that could perform various tricks. Here's the quote from the book. The bird, perched on the woman's hand, went through a series of routines as Grayson, the host, and Chatter, the chimpanzee, looked on. In the middle of the act, Chatter suddenly grabbed the bird, bit its head off, and, without missing a beat, placed the carcass back on the shocked woman's hand. As his guest crumpled to the floor, a stunned Grayson stared at his partner and the station cut quickly to a commercial. That's pretty fucked up. Edit, here's the URL to Google Books result, but I own the actual book and grew up watching the 1970s shows. As someone who works with animals regularly, animal technician and practicing veterinarian, large primates unsettle me a bit. I guess it's because of how similar they are to us in some ways. They're just too intelligent and have those disgusting grasping hands that they can do so much with. I remember watching a documentary about Africa and its wildlife, and there was a scene in it that featured a group of grey-cheeked mangabeys tearing apart a duiker, not even just biting it, but also literally ripping parts of skin off of it with their hands. It was honestly horrifying to watch, and I've watched many videos of predators killing prey beforehand, already knew of chimps killing monkeys and antelope prior to that too. Fascinating, but also horrifying. But then again, my rabbit killed my duck when I was young, so it doesn't really come as too much of a surprise that some animals are more capable of killing than we might think. By the way, I just want to note that I don't think that primates are evil or anything like that. In fact, I'm very fascinated by them and have a particular interest in great apes, especially gorillas and orangutans. I don't hate any animal, just a natural feeling in me. Not completely afraid of them, and I don't believe that chimps are 5x stronger than humans or anything like that, just a little unnerved. About the rabbit, she killed the duck by pinning him down and chewing him alive. There, no need to ask again. Not really as messed up as a lot of these, but still creepy. That episode of Tom and Jerry where Tom gets depressed and sits on a railroad track, waiting for a train to come. Then Jerry comes to join him sitting down. The episode cuts to black and ends, and it never mentions it after that. Strange. I got another one. T&J episode in which Tom dies and goes to heaven, but he is not allowed in cause he's been an asshole to Jerry. He is given a time limit for Jerry to forgive him or he will go to hell. While he is up in heaven, trying to get in, A dripping wet sack of something comes rolling in. It unties and out come a bunch of kittens, straight on through the pearly gates. I know I saw it as a kid and it didn't even register with me. As an adult, my jaw dropped because, holy shit, what the actual fuck, man? For us in the UK, the animals of Farthingwood. Graphic, gruesome death was a regular feature. It included Mr. and Mrs. Hedgehog getting run over. Whatever you do, dearest, don't curl up, squish. Mr. Pheasant is shot dead as he stares in horror at his dead wife, shot earlier, who has been cooked and roasted. Sinuous the adder is choked to death by rats. The baby mice are impaled on thorns by a shrike. There were 24 deaths across 39 episodes, every one of them a major character. Holy shit. German here, I remember watching it as a little girl. Really messed with me. For years any unfamiliar movie or similar with a title referring to forest animals that kinda could have fit the story brought me back. Can still see the dead baby mice. Thanks for bringing it back to me. Now I finally know the title. I can avoid it. The thing I am repressing has a name at last. Now to never speak or think of it again. Remember when SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs murdered and buried the health inspector? Either the series finale of Alf in which Alf is captured by the government presumably to be experimented on, or the series finale of Dinosaurs in which the entire civilization is destroyed. I was about to post the Dinosaurs one. The finale was them just staring out the window at snow, and while I don't think they knew what was going to happen, we sure as fuck did. Soupy sales in 1965. Pasted from Wikipedia. New Year's Day incident edit, on January 1, 1965, miffed at having to work on the holiday, Sales ended his live broadcast by encouraging his young viewers to tiptoe into their still sleeping parents' bedrooms and remove those funny green pieces of paper with pictures of US presidents from their pants and pocketbooks. Put them in an envelope and mail them to me, Soupy instructed the children. Several days later, substantial amounts of money had begun arriving in the mail. Sales stated that the total amount received was in the thousands of dollars but qualified that by stating that much of that was in play money. Sales said he had been joking and that whatever real money had been sent would be donated to charity, but as parents' complaints increased, news management suspended Sales for 2 weeks. There's this Hey Arnold episode called The Ghost Bride, and the story is basically that this lady was madly in love with her fiancé but was stood up at the altar because he had fallen in love with her sister and married her the very next day. So the lady goes berserk and puts on her wedding dress, gets an axe from her basement, walks to the newlywed couple's home, kills them both in their beds, and when the cops come, she's rocking back and forth in a rocking chair next to the bodies, throwing rice on them and humming the wedding march. To finish it all off, she immediately jumps out of the window and kills herself. There is an episode of Scooby-Doo, one of the ones with Scooby, Shaggy and Scrappy only, where they are being chased around a pyramid by a mummy and they beat him by unraveling him. But then when they are leaving they turn round and footsteps are following them in the sand. They run away, footsteps return to the pyramid and then the episode ends. Only example in classic Scooby I think where the monster was real. Fair to say I've been scared of mummies ever since I'm in my 20s. I remember that episode of the Magic School Bus when that ginger dude took off his helmet in space after being told not to and his dome turned to ice or something like that. Spooked me as a kid. Oh yeah, the one where his sister or cousin or something made an appearance. Basically the plot is Arnold's relative visits the school, and is skeptical about Mrs. Frizzle. They go to space, and the relative is collecting rocks to show to her class. She went to a different school. Once they go to all the planets, her rocks are so heavy that the bus can't go. The relative refuses to get rid of any rocks. Arnold gets fed up with it, and takes off his helmet to convince her to go home. The worst part? Mrs. Frizzle doesn't do a thing. The Looney Tunes where the bulldog, I think his name is Caesar or Romeo anyway, he wants to keep a kitten. His owner is already mad, so he tried to hide kitten. Stuff happens and he ends up believing the kitten was baked into cookies, and the owner gives him a cat-shaped cookie and he's crying puddles of tears and grabs the cookie pretending it's the kitty, completely traumatized. There was a very special anti-drug episode of the 80s cartoon Brave Star. In this episode, a couple of kids get hooked on a new drug. At the end of the episode, one of the kids died from an overdose. 30+ years later, and I'm not sure how many children's shows even today would kill a kid. Captain Planet did the same thing. A drug called bliss that makes the user happy and all their problems go away, but also makes them reckless and not fear injury or death, and is extremely addictive. Linka's cousin gets addicted and then manages to get her hooked, but she quits after he dies of an overdose. In the original Powerpuff Girls there was this episode called Buttercrush that I never really forgot. Buttercup sort of got into a relationship with the leader of the Gangrene Gang, but the leader kept on taking advantage of her and she had no idea. It gets to the point where she ditches her sisters to hang out with him, but he just keeps on using her. Of course at the end she realized what was going on and beat him up, though. I guess it really wasn't that dark or anything, but it always made me feel sick inside when I saw it. Maybe it was partly about age difference, but it was the first time I saw a relationship like that in a cartoon. Probably either the reveal of the Nomad's genocide in Avatar or Bill Cipher's introductory scene where he yanks a deer's teeth out of its head as a present in Gravity Falls. Not exactly on the children's show itself, but about 20 years ago during a midday episode of the Spider-Man cartoon, the news broke in to cover a live high-speed chase that ended in a standoff on a popular Los Angeles freeway. The suspect abruptly blew the top of his own head off with a rifle on live television. The top of his head literally flapped open like a can of SpaghettiOs. Camera caught everything. I assure you, kids watching that were never the same. That deer in Adventure Time. He had kidnapped everyone in a city and then systematically covered them with his orange saliva and stuck them to the side of the wall in a sewer. Oh, and he also did this. Adventure Time also had some seriously existential episodes as well. One that always sticks out to me is the one where Finn gets cursed inside of a dungeon, and every single time he opens his eyes he is transported right back to where the curse first started. He escapes the dungeon over and over, living months, maybe even years, as a blind kid before eventually giving in and opening his eyes only to be transported back in time to the beginning of the dungeon in the exact same manner. Jake often never believes Finn is cursed, and forces Finn's eyes open, resetting everything over and over like Groundhog Day. He eventually breaks the curse by abandoning Jake and wandering blind and aimlessly across the world, for God knows how long, until he happens upon the dungeon's twin. When he finally exits the twin dungeon, he opens his eyes to Jake greeting him as if time never looped in the first place. I freaking love Adventure Time. Here you can watch the second half of the episode. Nobody's mentioned the show Are You Afraid of the Dark? That shit was the most psychologically damaging show I ever watched as a child. The one that has haunted me to this day was an episode in which one way or another a young boy gets locked up in a jail cell and gets left behind in the freaking dark. That's how the episode ends, with him shouting and crying in the dark. Some Franz Kafka shit right there. Not actually a children's show, but the Supper Hour local news broadcast in the somewhat rural region where I grew up, so family-friendly news, basically. It was Easter, so they decided it'd be cute to have the hosts in chairs away from the usual desk, and to place a low pen, like a sandbox, on the floor in front of them, and put some cute rabbits in the pen to just sort of hop around inside the pen, and eat some grass and be cute during the broadcast. So during the broadcast, the rabbits started doing what rabbits do. They started hopping onto each other and doing their darndest to make some more little rabbits. The horrified hosts finally noticed this. Live broadcast though, so they had to keep trucking and talking. The single camera wasn't really able to cut away or switch angles or tile up away from the rabbits for whatever reason. The broadcast finally cut to a clip of something else, so the rabbits were off screen for a bit. The camera angle was moved up so that when the hosts came back, the rabbits were out of sight. Wonder how many horrified parents phoned in to complain. Lol. The most fucked up ones I remember as a kid were the stories where the baddies win in an episode and murder every one of your favorite characters before some time travel reset button is pressed at the end. I'm looking at you, Captain Scarlet and Space Precinct. I can't remember any of your other episodes, but that shit stays with you. Basically every evil plot on Totally Spies, vastly underrated show by the way. People mostly remember it as the introduction to fetishes that don't look like fetishes when it was a diverse, both minority and clique-wise, group of girls fighting what 9 times out of 10 were evil 1%ers with the closest thing you could get to literal weaponized femininity outside of a magical girl show, laser lipstick, compact computers, earring mini-bombs etc. That episode of The Simpsons where Homer's mum comes back after years of being absent only to have to go on the run again. Homer crying and running after the car still haunts me today. Also from another Simpsons episode, there was a short clip where Homer took a picture of himself every day for 20 years or something similar. You watch him go from a happy toddler, then watching his parents argue in the background. The house starts falling apart, his father Abe looks depressed. It goes into his teen years and he starts drinking, and drinking. He's now depressed. Honestly, I think they should have won an award for that. It was like a work of art. Absolutely heartbreaking yet beautiful. I used to watch the cartoon series 7 Cities of Gold before school in the mornings. Every episode ended with a short educational bit about Middle American history and such. Show was set during the Spanish invasion of the New World. Well, one of the history segments was about the Aztec ritual sacrifices and shows a man actually sacrificing a chicken by cutting its head off. And they show the rest of the chicken running around without a head.